Control versus ownership. Welcome back to Priviso Live. How's it? And a warm welcome to Priviso Live, your weekly walk through the world of information security, ICT legislation, and artificial intelligence from right here in South Africa. I'm Lynn, and I am not flying solo. Stephen is with me.
Afternoon, everybody.
And Kayla.
Hi all, lovely to be back.
Now, we honestly did not plan this, but the 3 stories we have for you today all rhyme. Every one of them comes down to a single, slightly uncomfortable question. Who is actually in control of the things you think you own? Your private messages, your machines, and even your connection to the internet. So let us get into it. Kayla, you are taking us to Brussels.
I am. So this past week, the European Parliament let something slip through that the privacy world has been fighting over for years. It is the interim regulation everyone calls chat control. In plain terms, it is a temporary law that lets messaging and email companies voluntarily scan your private messages, looking for child sexual abuse material, which the specialists shorten to CSAM.
And voluntarily is doing an awful lot of work in that sentence.
It really is. Here is what actually happened. A clear majority of the members who voted were against it, 314 against, 276 in favor. But to reject the regulation outright, they needed an absolute majority of 361 votes, and they did not reach it. So because the no camp fell short of that hard threshold, the scanning simply carries on, and it is now permitted right through to 2028.
So a majority vote couldn't stop it. It tells you exactly why Europe is so over-regulated.
So the majority said no, and the answer still came back yes.
Pretty much, and that is exactly why Patrick Breyer, the former member of parliament who has led the charge against this, called it a farce. Now, to be fair and objective, nobody in this debate is against protecting children. The whole disagreement is about the method, and the method is the part that should make every security professional sit up. What we are really talking about is scanning everyone's private communications with no suspicion and no warrant. In our trade, we call that suspicionless mass scanning. You treat every single user as a suspect, just in case.
And the numbers Breyer cites, drawn from the European Commission's own figures, are quite something. In 2024, scanning private chats produced only about 36% of the abuse reports. The bulk came from public posts and cloud storage, which were always scannable anyway. The German federal police reckon nearly half of the alerts they receive are not even criminally relevant in the first place.
So a great deal of noise and a great many innocent people's messages swept up along the way.
Exactly. And there is a technical sting in the tail. End-to-end encrypted chats, your WhatsApp and your Signal, where only the sender and the receiver can read the message, were never part of this scanning. So the pressure to weaken encryption does not disappear, it just moves to the next fight, the permanent law they are already calling Chat Control 2.0.
Which is where it lands on our desks. If you run a South African business, your staff are on Instagram, on Gmail, on iCloud, and your data flows through those platforms. Under our own Protection of Personal Information Act, POPIA, you remain accountable for how that personal information is processed, even when it is a foreign platform doing the processing.
So the practical takeaway, Kayla,
Know where your sensitive conversations actually happen, prefer properly encrypted channels for anything confidential, and keep half an eye on Europe because where they land on encryption, the rest of us tend to feel it just now.
lovely. Right, from your messages to your machines. Stephen, there was a big right to repair result this week, and it involves tractors of all things.
It does, and I promise it is more interesting than it sounds. On the 8th of July, the American Federal Trade Commission, their competition and consumer watchdog, settled a case with John Deere, the giant that makes farm equipment. Alongside 5 American states, they had taken Deere to court back in January 2025, arguing the company held a stranglehold over who was allowed to repair its tractors.
And I gather a modern tractor is basically a computer that happens to have wheels.
That is the whole point. A modern tractor does not just run on diesel, it runs on authorization. When a part fails and you bolt in a new one, the machine will not accept it until the software pairs it. And for years that software lived only in the hands of a Deere dealer. So a farmer could own the steel, 400 horsepower of it, and still not be allowed to give the machine permission to work.
There is a rather good line doing the rounds. We sell the steel once, we sell the permission forever.
That is it exactly. And when an emission sensor tripped, The tractor would drop into what they call limp mode, crawling along at walking pace in October with the rain coming and the whole year's harvest standing in the field until a dealer arrived for a fee.
Aish, so what does the settlement actually change?
For 10 years, Deere must give independent workshops and farmers the same diagnostic and repair tools its own dealers get, and it may not retaliate against people who choose to fix their own kit. There's $1 million to cover the state's legal costs too, and that follows a separate $99 million settlement with farmers back in April.
And why does a tractor in Iowa matter to an information security manager in Johannesburg?
Because the very same model is everywhere in your environment. Medical devices, network hardware, building management systems, even the vehicles in your fleet. Vendors increasingly sell you the hardware once, then hold the keys to the firmware forever. From a security angle, that is a real risk. If you cannot patch or repair a device without the vendor's blessing, then your ability to close a vulnerability depends entirely on somebody else's schedule and somebody else's price.
So it is an ownership question that is really a security question.
Every single time. When you are buying, write right to repair and the right to patch into the contract. Ask who controls the firmware. Because a device you cannot service on your own terms is a device that somebody else controls.
Beautifully put, which brings us home and up into the sky. Kayla, our third story is about who controls your actual connection.
It is, and it is, a very South African one. The satellite internet debate, and specifically why a service like Starlink still is not licensed here. A quick bit of background. Starlink uses what is called low Earth orbit, or LEO satellites, flying just a few hundred kilometers up. Because they are so close, the signal delay, the latency, is low, so it feels like ordinary broadband.
As opposed to the older satellites parked way up in geostationary orbit, thousands of kilometers out, where the round trip for your data can be half a second or more. That is fine for a voice call in the middle of nowhere, and fairly hopeless for a video meeting.
Right, so the technology is genuinely useful, especially for rural clinics, farms, and businesses far from any fiber. The holdup is not the tech, it is the licensing. To operate here, an operator needs licenses from our regulator, ICASA, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. And under the Electronic Communications Act, the rules have required 30% ownership by historically disadvantaged groups.
And that has been the sticking point, because the operator has a global policy of not giving up local equity.
Exactly. Now, in December 2025, government issued a policy direction that would let operators meet the requirement a different way, through what is called an equity equivalent investment program. Instead of handing over shares, a company invests in local initiatives, infrastructure, skills, small Black-owned businesses. But, and it is a real but, ICASA still has to run its process and amend its regulations before anyone can even apply. Realistically, we are looking at late 2026 or 2027.
And this is exactly where it gets contentious, because while the licensing grinds on, the real question is what South Africans actually use in the meantime.
There are already licensed low Earth orbit alternatives operating here. OneWeb, now owned by Eutelsat, runs a constellation with latency in much the same ballpark as Starlink, and it is sold locally through a Pretoria engineering firm, QCon, under the 2B brand. SES offers services as well.
So on paper, we are not stranded. But here is the catch. Those alternatives are built mainly for business and wholesale customers, sold through partners, and priced to match. They are not the cheap, plug-it-in-yourself, direct-to-consumer box that has made Starlink such a phenomenon elsewhere.
Which is why critics argue South Africans are being nudged toward a lesser solution at a weaker price. Enterprise-grade kit that an ordinary household or a small rural clinic simply cannot afford, while our neighbors in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Mozambique already have Starlink switched on.
One commentator on X, Farai Majindu, stated, and I quote, "The mafia network South African politicians opted for instead of Starlink is basically a vintage Thuraya brick phone. Imagine forcing an economy onto a network with 600 milliseconds of lag, where you have to point a massive antenna at the sky just to get 12 kilobytes per second. Starlink is literally mastering low Earth orbit direct to cell, while the cadres HL to back South Africa's technological advancement," unquote.
Strong feelings there.
In fairness, there is another side to it. Some analysts note that Starlink arriving tomorrow would not automatically collapse prices on its own. You still need local competition for that. And OneWeb's latency really is comparable, so lesser is partly about cost and consumer access rather than raw speed.
And notice how the whole thing has quietly shifted from a technical licensing matter into a political one, an early test of how the Government of National Unity handles foreign investment and empowerment rules. We will keep our own commentary well out of that ring, but you should watch it closely, because the outcome decides what connectivity you can actually buy.
And I would add a security and resilience angle here. Objectively, satellite is a superb backup. When the fiber gets cut or load shedding takes out a tower, a satellite link can keep a site online. But a link that comes from a single foreign operator is also a dependency. Think carefully about where your data routes and about who could switch it off.
So don't wait for the headlines to settle. Look at connectivity resilience now, treat satellite as one option in the mix, and build for the day your primary link goes down.
Could not have said it better.
And there is our thread, all tied up. Your messages, your machines, your connection. In every case, the real question was never the technology, it was control. And whether the person who owns the thing is the person who decides what it does.
Which, as it happens, is the sort of knot we help clients untangle for a living.
Funny that. Kayla, take us out.
And there you have it. This has been Priviso Live. We hope you found today's episode interesting. If you did, please share it with your colleagues, your friends, your family. Word of mouth is a strong driver of podcast growth. If you want to hear more of the same, subscribe to Priviso Live on Apple, Samsung, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or YouTube.
And if you need security, risk, or ICT legislation advice, contact Priviso, consulting directly at admin@priviso.co.za.
Should you have topics you'd like us to cover or questions about anything we discussed today, reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners.
I'm Steven.
And I'm Kayla. Thanks for listening.
Stay secure.
Stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe.